Shake a man's hand and look him in the eye. Is that so hard to do? Don't blow smoke and don't tell lies. Son, just tell the truth. There's rumors going round all around town. You've been talking shit. I've never been a violent man. I'd rather be drinking beer. But that's the name Granddaddy gave me. And let me make it clear, you're gonna shut your mouth or say it to my face, or I'm gonna use your ass like a broom to sweep this place. Go on and call up your friends. You better bring a few. I come from a different time when the men were all old school.
Hello, folks. Welcome to Cracker Culture, the podcast for real Floridians. I am Smokin Joe, and I'm joined by my friend, political analyst Ford O'Connell. Before we get started with today's show, let me tell you about Farmer Joe's Fresh Market. Farmer Joe's Fresh Market is located at 1401 Southwest Pine Island Road in beautiful Cape Coral, Florida. Absolutely the best grocery store in all of Lee County. Today is their 1 year anniversary, and they've got all kinds of 1 year deals. You might buy something for $1 an item, you might buy it for $1 a pound. So rush down to Farmer Joe's for their 1 year anniversary. Ford, it's good to see you. I've been watching. You've been real busy. It seems everyone's hungry for your insight on all this political madness.
Well, I've been lucky. I'm highly in demand, but I'll tell you this. I mean, we're only 18 days into the year, and I feel like I've lived 18 political lifetimes. But, you know, that's the problem with the Democrats. You have, particularly in Washington, if you stop fighting, they start winning.
Well, you know, and here's the thing. The big story right now is the debt ceiling. Secretary Yellen of the Treasury says we're going to hit the debt ceiling tomorrow. If you explain the effect that'll happen to the citizens if we default?
If we default, what'll wind up happening is they'll lower the U.S. credit rating. And if they lower the U.S. credit rating, that means we're going to pay even more interest on the debt. And that's why you're hearing these doom and gloom economic scenarios. But if I did have to say this, if there's one issue that separates Republicans from Democrats, it's over the issue of spending and debt. Democrats think we have a taxing problem, and Republicans rightly think we have a spending problem. And unfortunately, our debt is now nearing $31.4 trillion. And if you don't get spending under control, you're never going to get inflation under control.
Well, I got a question. If we are at our debt ceiling and we borrow more money, does that not give China more leverage over us?
That's exactly right. That is what China's hoping for. This is how China intends to take over America. They don't intend to do it with their military. They intend to lock in our debt and use our debt against us.
Yeah, it's just incredible. Now there's certain countries that set their benchmark for their debt ceiling so high they never reach it, like Denmark. Now, you know, what effects does that have? If we were to raise our debt ceiling so high, what effects would that have? I mean, how does Denmark do it and we can't?
Well, Denmark also understands a little bit better than the United States to live within their means. Let me give you an example. In 2003, Joe, our national debt was roughly $6 trillion. Now it's $31.4 trillion. And the reason is very simple. There is no incentive in Washington, D.C. to ever balance the budget or to bring down the debt. All they want to do is continue to run more interest on the taxpayers / national credit card. So unfortunately, the incentive is not in Washington, like say in the state of Florida, where you're mandated to balance the budget.
Well, here's the thing. It seems like we go through this every year. This is an annual thing. We're going to reach the debt ceiling. Everything's going to shut down every year. In fact, Do you think this new House can do something to change that?
Well, they're going to have to try to change the mindset in Washington, and their backs are against the wall because you have to understand Republicans control the House, but that is only 1/2 of 1/3 of the federal government. And they're going to have essentially, we're going to hit the debt limit tomorrow, but they're going to have a couple of months due to Treasury maneuvering of money to be able to negotiate. The question is, will they find a way to negotiate such that we get spending cuts to correspond with the rising debt? If they do, they will be successful. But right now, the Democrats are showing no interest whatsoever in spending cuts.
Now, I listened to Governor DeSantis, and he spoke on the spending, and I want to play a little clip of what he said, and tell me your opinion on this.
Jimmy and I just had a meeting of the Florida cabinet, and we had a great guy who went over Florida's bond ratings and all that other stuff. And so our debt per capita in the state of Florida is one of the lowest in the country. If you calculated how much debt each Floridian, you take Florida's debt and apply it to each Floridian, it's like what, $764 per person is what you would owe for our debt. Compare that with the federal debt, which is $31 trillion. That's like what, $91,000 for every American to be able to do our debt, and that's more than most people make in an entire year. And so,
how do we come ahead of this?
Well, look, Ron DeSantis makes a great point about the economic stewardship of Florida. The issue here is that Social Security and Medicare, which are funded by the federal government, are 70% of the federal government's payouts. Plus, you also have the military and defense. And, when you look at it, the real answer lies in what is known as non-discretionary spending. That's when you hear the crazy stories about the federal government spending $2 million to inject hamsters with steroids or whatever nonsense. Rand Paul estimates that there's about $400 billion in waste, fraud, and abuse. And that is what we need to be tackling. Unfortunately, the Democrats are never going to go after that because the way they get votes is spending money on ridiculous items.
Well, now you brought up the credit score. Now, we started out with a AAA credit score. I know that at one point we were down to a 2A credit score. Do you know where we're at currently?
Where are we at, my friend?
Well, I'm not sure, but that's just going to raise our interest of the lower our credit rating goes as America, the more that these other people that loan us the money, they're going to charge. So if you invest $1,000 and you get that in a security bond, you get paid back guaranteed you get $20 annually back. How's that going to affect that?
Well, that's exactly right. You want to have a AAA credit score, and if our credit rating drops, then you're going to wind up paying more interest, and the value of your money is going to be less. I believe it was like 2010 or 2011, we had this debt ceiling fight, and that is when last time, I believe, we got downgraded. And I know that people want the Republicans to dig in, and they should dig in and try to extract concessions. But you're right. The biggest problem going forward is we cannot risk another downgrade to our credit score because that is something that every single American will feel in their pocketbook.
It's just incredible to me. I mean, everybody's got to live within a budget. I mean, people at home, you got to have a budget at home. Why can't we get this together in our government? I mean, that's supposed to be some of the smartest political and economic minds there. And to me, I mean, John over here at the tractor company does better with his books than they do.
That's exactly right, but it's the way the federal government's set up. That is the problem. That is what needs to be attacked, and that is what is never explained. There's no balanced budget initiative like there is in Florida. There's no incentive to balance the books. And when you hear about spending cuts, they're not actual spending cuts at the federal government level. They're reductions in the rate of growth because the federal government operates on an October to October calendar. And if you were, say, the Department of Agriculture and you don't spend your entire budget, then you get penalized next year. But if you spend the entire budget, even on foolish items, then you get a budget increase. It is absolutely ridiculous, and this is never explained to the average American.
Yeah, we got to get more transparent. And speaking of transparency, last time we talked about the classified documents. We talked about the classified documents found in Biden's think tank at the University of Pennsylvania. And more documents are just showing up. They're turning up at Joe Biden's residence. And I have a huge concern on who could have accessed these documents.
Well, I think that that's a legitimate concern. We were told they were only at Biden's think tank office in Washington, D.C. We find them at his home. We find him next to his Corvette. I mean, this is a real problem because this occurred 6 years ago. These documents have been floating around, and somehow the media just turns another cheek to Joe Biden. This is something that should concern every American because the federal penalty for removing documents from the White House without authorization, which Joe Biden didn't have, or handling them in a negligent way, is a 10-year prison sentence. And yet somehow Joe Biden is spinning and turning and lying to the American people. I promise you, if this was Donald Trump, we'd never hear the end of it.
Yeah, there's a double standard. But, my cause for concern is we all know that Hunter Biden's compromised. Everybody knows this. Now, during one of his crack binges, anyone could have infiltrated that garage. I mean, there really wasn't that kind of security there. I mean, it's a garage. And I've got children. I've raised boys. And I'm going to tell you, my boys prowled through everything until they got caught.
Well, look, I think you're absolutely right. Our nation's secrets are floating out there because Joe Biden, doesn't follow protocol, and it puts America at risk. And I think your point about Hunter Biden, because remember, the Hunter Biden story is not a Hunter Biden story. It's a Joe Biden story. And the question is, in the business dealings that the Biden family did with Ukraine, China, you name it, are they now compromised with America's greatest adversaries? Unfortunately, the mainstream media hasn't linked the two stories because there's no question about it that Hunter Biden's a national security risk. Now you add this plus the funding of China to the University of Pennsylvania to set up the Joe Biden speakership. And I'll tell you, it's very, very concerning, particularly since China is the greatest adversary of America in the 21st century.
Well, and I listened to some of the different media sources, and it was different. It was different. What Biden does, he was transparent with it. Look, the only difference is who it was. It was a difference. Trump was a president when those documents went to his home. Biden was not.
That's exactly right. Vice presidents have no authority to declassify or remove documents from a White House. A president, on the other hand, has the authority to do it. And not only that, when there was a document dispute, they made sure the FBI and the DOJ that Trump's documents were secured. It is a complete and utter double standard. They allow Biden's attorneys to run around his home in Wilmington, Delaware, unsupervised by the FBI, and yet the DOJ and the FBI raid Donald Trump's home. This is the double standard, and this is what infuriates Republicans. There's a standard for Democrats and a standard for Republicans, and we get treated like second-class citizens.
Well, and like what you just said, now they are basically policing themselves. They're not allowing anybody that's got actual clearance to view the classified information, search for the classified information. I've been fighting this in Lee County with the local school board. They police themselves. There's never nobody held accountable because once you police yourself, well, I've done no wrong, move on.
Look, I think that is exactly right. It's about accountability and transparency. And I will tell you that based on what we saw with Hillary Clinton, I have a hard time believing that Joe Biden is going to get anything other than a slap on the hand. But they did appoint a special counsel. There's two theories in Washington about why this story is breaking now. We knew that the first batch of documents was found right before the midterms, but there's two theories going on. The first is that the Democrats are trying to throw Joe Biden under the bus and get rid of him ahead of 2024. The second one is the DOJ and the FBI are looking to claw back more power in Washington, D.C. by saying, well, we gave Trump a special counsel. Now we've given Biden one. Wink, wink. So there are a lot of theories going around Washington about why this is happening right now.
Well, now I have noticed there are a few Democrats coming forward, not real happy with the situation. But what are they going to say? You either got to say, well, I'm going to completely lie for this bastard, or I'm not. I'm not. I mean, and I've seen a couple of them. It starts, well, it's not good, but they're not really damning it like they did Trump.
Well, look, they are spinning like a top. They don't know what they don't know. And they'll talk about things like security, protocol, agreement, chain of method. They're lying through their teeth. The bottom line is Joe Biden stole documents from the Obama White House, and he failed to secure them in his private residence where he shouldn't have had them in the first place. It is a clear-cut case of a violation, but they're going to lie because what they want to say ultimately is Donald Trump, orange man bad.
Well, I don't understand. I would think there would be more accountability for classified documents. And I'm just stupid, I guess. I would have thought it was like a chain of evidence where you had to sign it out, check it out. Everybody knew where it was at. You followed a strict protocol. They knew when you took it out. They knew when you returned it. And if that was the case, you wouldn't have them laying in Joe's garage and everywhere else. I mean,
or Hillary Clinton's server. Look, yeah. I hear you. There are strict protocols set down by the Espionage Act and the 1978 Records Act. It's just that some people in Washington don't feel the need to follow them. And when there are no consequences for not following them, this is what you get.
Yeah, I feel like I was born in the age of Aquarius and aged into the uprising of idiots. I just can't wrap my head around this.
Well, I will say this. There are various types of classifications. What we understand based on news reports is that the documents that Joe Biden had were part of Ukraine, Iran. So that's what you think when you think classified documents. There's also another parlor game in Washington, D.C., where a lot of people will classify documents just so they can't get out in the public sphere for political purposes. So there are two types of classifications, but we do know when it comes to Ukraine, Iran, and other stuff that Joe Biden has had the bad classification out there, and very few people are talking about it. Remember when Donald Trump had classified documents, because basically every document he holds is classified, they were arguing about nuclear codes and every other nonsense on the face of the earth, and none of that was true. And here you do have media reports of Ukraine, Iran documents relating to them, and yet the media doesn't, no peep.
And I don't understand why everybody ain't scared to death of this news, because, if Hunter's compromised, now Biden's bound to be compromised with this think tank at University of Pennsylvania, because they were lobbying for the CCP.
That's what's amazing. Underneath the surface, Joe, honestly, I mean, the Democrats have been lobbying for the CCP for decades, but so have a lot of Republicans. And the way the CCP works is you never know that they're actually there. And I think this is a great example of how they've dug themselves into every aspect of our economy and society.
Yeah, I just wish that true transparency was what we saw. We don't want to see the truth. I don't believe people really want to know the truth. People like you and I might, but the average person just wants to, I don't want to worry about that night today.
Well, no, I think you're absolutely right. People talk about transparency, but there's some people that really don't want to know. They want to stick their head like an ostrich in the sand, and they say, we elect these people so I don't have to worry about these things. My question is, who's watching the people we're electing?
Yeah, you can't, I've said it before, you can't police yourself, man. That's just not fair. It's not fair to the citizens that there's no accountability if there's nobody other than you to look at what you're doing. Well, what about McCarthy? Now, McCarthy, this is he's said he's going to release all the footage from January 6th. Now, why are they withholding that footage this long?
Well, that is the $1 trillion question, my friend. And last week, Speaker McCarthy said he would make public, nearly 14,000 hours of unreleased footage. And I hate to get conspiratorial, but I'll be totally honest with you. The reason why I don't think a lot of people have seen the footage is because you're going to see what I call intentional security lapses. They could have done a better job defending the Capitol. They chose not to do it because they wanted to play politics versus putting safety forward.
And I also heard that they're calling for hearings with Nancy Pelosi about her lack of control of the Capitol Police. I understand.
Well, that is exactly what Jim Jordan and others are talking about when they talk about the weaponization of the government. I mean, I've been hearing rumors about it throughout Washington about what it is they want to cover. And I understand that there have been hearings with Capitol Police officers and others that basically were saying, wait a minute, you came armed to the teeth from head to toe to the Capitol, and you didn't think something was not going to, go on. Why didn't you call in the National Guard earlier? Why didn't you take this security mechanism? I think the American public needs to know that this is far more than what they've been told for the last 2 years by the news media and the Democrats.
So do you think our congressmen like Byron Donalds and other congressmen will get behind this and bring out the truth of this January 6th investigation? Because there's a lot of patriots that might not have should have been in prison for this that are sitting there awaiting trial.
Well, that's a great question because, I'm also a lawyer, Joe. And one of the things I'll say is that if I'm a January 6th detainee, I want to be able to make sure I can put my best defense forward. And if you don't have all 14,000 hours at your fingertips to make your case, then you start wondering where due process is going. Look, if I believe that if you get that 14 hours of footage out there, you will do your job and the rest will take over.
Well, that's opening up every day. We're finding out more and more. And I agree with you. Jim Jordan is remarkable. I think he's doing a remarkable job leading this fight on this. I just hope that others will follow Jim's lead and get us some information. Get the people that shouldn't be in prison. If they belong there, I'm all about it. Leave them in there. But if they don't, we need to give them a fast and speediest trial, which is their right.
That's exactly right. And I think, look, there's a lot of bad things that took place on January 6th. But at the same time, it also shows you how the swamp will go into defense mode to play politics just to put down a political opponent because they don't like it. What I'd like to know is back when we had the Summer of Love and the riots, where the security footage for that? Where are the people being held for destroying public property and destroying federal courts, which is no different than bulldozing Congress or rioting in front of Congress? Again, this comes back to two standards. What's good for the goose is good for the gander. And the fundamental right in America that we all love is due process.
Well, I hope them people get their due process soon. I think it's been
a travesty. It's been a travesty.
Horrible. Now, and I wasn't planning on talking this, but I just seen that Marjorie Taylor Greene got an appointment to the Homeland Security Committee.
I think that's a great thing. There's a lot of people like Marjorie Taylor Greene and Paul Gosar who were stripped of their committee positions under Nancy Pelosi and now have been given very good positions under Kevin McCarthy. And I'd like to see them go to work, particularly, and again, Homeland Security. This is a great example of what we're talking about. Democrats say, gee, this is a threat to the Republic, a threat to democracy, whatever it may be. Well, let's find out. Was this everything you spun it to be? Because something tells me it was bad. It was a bad riot, but it's not what they've been claiming for 2 years.
Well, I think what we've seen in out in California is way worse than anything we've seen in Washington, D.C., in my opinion.
Well, there's no question about it. And to your point, that's what we're talking about, the weaponization of the federal government against its own people. We should not stand for that regardless of party affiliation.
Ford, I want to try to rein us back into Southwest Florida. You know, I've supported a lot of these different candidates, both in Lee and Collier County. And one of the things that's going on right now, the Collier County commissioners are in turmoil because the residents are demanding that the board return $1.4 million CDC grant to vaccinate migrant workers. It's the wealthiest, one of the wealthiest counties in the nation, Collier County. So,
yeah, it is, and unfortunately, when you take federal money like that, you are now beholden to directives of the CDC and HHS. This is how the federal government likes to backdoor local rule and to claw back more power. And frankly, when you're talking about 1.4 million for the vaccination of illegal immigrants, also understand that you're encouraging illegal immigration in Collier County. I'm not blind. I know that we have illegal immigrants all over Collier County, but when you start to offer things like vaccinations and health care on demand to illegal immigrants, you're encouraging illegal immigration. And Collier County needs to start to understand what it stands for, because to your point, it is one of the wealthiest counties, not only in Florida, but also in America. And the way Collier County conducts itself is the way that 67 other counties will take notice.
well, I want to clarify that this grant was not just for illegal immigrants, it was for migrant farm workers as well. And, you know, being an H-2A contractor, I know a little bit about the needs of these individuals that come over here legally and work and go back legally. And look, most of them are over here. They already was mandated to take the vaccine before they ever got over here. So this money really ain't no good to those people. Anybody that come across the border after COVID up until current day had to have this vaccine passport.
Yeah, look, I understand what you're saying. You need to separate those with visas and green cards out of the equation. But at the same time, what always concerns me is that when you take federal money, it's going to come with restrictions that you may not otherwise see initially. That's how the federal government suckers you in. Take money today, we'll demand something tomorrow. It's kind of funny. The CCP operates the same way.
Well, that's exactly what local grocer and proprietor Seed the Table had said. He said he would pull his support for the Collier County Commission if they did not return this CDC money, because there's stipulations that go along with this money. And with some of the stipulations is that you follow all their mandates. Where they tell you to go lock down again or mask up, you got that $1.4 million. They want you to mask up or, you know, bring more mandates in.
And that is always the danger with weighing federal money. And if you're going to take federal money, you have to understand that every single time you do, you're giving up local or state control. And that's something you have to balance. And look, I'll be honest, being one of the 5 county commissioners in Collier County, you're going to have to make some tough decisions, but you always have to remember something. What looks good today may not look good tomorrow. And at the end of the day, you are trying to defend the long-term prosperity of Collier County with the best information you have in front of you.
And I know at least 2 of those candidates are newly elected candidates. And those 2, I mean, if you want to say, okay, they weren't there when the CDC offered the grant, but you're there now. And if you're truly America First candidates, it's time to start standing up against these. We'll give you a handout to do our bidding. And that's exactly what it is. You take that money, you're indebted to the CDC, and that's all there is to it. Is there a timeline on it? I don't know. Is there a timeline how long you're indebted to the CDC if you take this money?
I'd have to look at the text of it. I'm not sure myself. But as you and I know, you and I are old enough to know one thing that a lot of younger folks don't know. There's no such thing as free money.
Never, no free ride, that's for sure. Well, you know, and we've got a lot of issues here in Lee County. One thing I want to talk to you about is in Lee County here, we have the REC, which we've talked about. They've elected America First board, and before they even get started, the establishment is trying to use the RLC, and that's the Republican Liberty Caucus, to go against the REC. They're using it as a vehicle to go against this new America First candidate. And what was strangely odd, I put out a little post about this the other day, that there was a secret meeting happened in Gateway. And I know the individual, I know exactly who gave him the location and everything else. I don't know that he really has looked at everything that's going on here. But what they did is they had a secret meeting in Gateway. They went ahead and they put their board together. Now, I know that Matt Caldwell and others are behind this, but what they did is, if you remember in the REC, the vote went down for one vote between between Mike Thompson and Andrew Sun. Well, Andrew Sun now is the chair of the Republican Liberty Caucus. And then the vice chair, and Ford, just hold on till you see, is Doris Cortez.
Look, you and I have discussed this for several weeks. There is a plot afoot to destroy the Lee County Republican Executive Committee. And the very people who lost in the last votes are the very people that are now trying to create their own vehicle to do that. And unfortunately, these are people who will not accept the will of the vote, and essentially they're not going to lose. And this is what the establishment does. If you beat them at their own game, like what happened in the last vote, they just regenerate, and then they screw up life for everybody in Lee County until you put them back in there. I mean, this is a shell game, and unfortunately, the residents of Lee County are the people that lose because a handful of people have decided that they lost the vote, and now they want to play politics.
Well, and the sad thing is, people that don't follow the local politics, they might say they follow it, but they don't really follow the ins and outs of these people they're putting in power. And that kind of bothers me, because I know personally, if I voted in the REC for Mike Thompson, and you turn around and bring another group in, and here's the thing now, what was it? Bob White, I think he's the head of the caucus, Florida, the Republican caucus, and he was contacted about this. And from my understanding, Bob White said, he says they can do what they want as long as they don't violate their charter. That being said, they're also allowing them to pick and choose who they allow to enter, become members of the new RLC, which...
This is destructive. This is not what's supposed to happen. You had a change in leadership, accept it, and work to make the unit better. And in 2 years, when you have another Lee County REC vote, make the best case that your candidate or slate of candidates should be in there. This is a type of destructive, backstabbing politics that has led to, that has really hurt the residents of Lee County. And you're absolutely right. Most people don't know the ins and outs of these different groups, or even what they do. They just kind of show up on election day or the week before and vote, and they go their happy way. Unfortunately, when you don't know what's going on around you, you become victim to somebody else's game.
Well, a lot of these people that's in the political game, they don't take nobody's advice but their own. And I'll give the REC some advice. If any of your members are currently a member of the RLC, this is my strategy. I would go and pay my dues for the entire year, so they can't kick me out or they can't refuse to let me back in. My dues is already paid. And do everything, because they've already said, this new Liberty Caucus that they're forming, already said they don't feel they can work with the leadership of the REC. They even gave it a chance. I mean,
Of course, they haven't given it a chance. They don't want to work with them. They want them to fail. They're going to do everything possible to make them fail. And then we're going to be right back at square one again in 2 years. This is the unfortunate part. There's a certain set of people that want to control the politics of Lee County. And when you uproot them and move them out via the vote, they're going to find another way to gang up and destroy it until you are forced to yell uncle and let them back in. That is the destruction of Lee County politics. This has been going on for decades, and it's time that people take a stand.
Yeah, Ford, and it's beyond me because these players have been at it, like you said, for decades, and the players don't change that much. They just kind of oscillate back and forth, you know.
Oh, they do. They term limit in one position, then they run for another position. And when there's an open position, they get together and decide who it's going to be. I mean, I think the folks in Lee County really need to wake up and understand that they're being played for suckers.
Yeah, and you know, we've got a lot of problems in Lee County, and I've talked about this. When I first got involved with this, I've done a lot with the Lee County Local School Board. And that goes back to what I was telling you earlier. The school board is doing the same thing that the Democrat government's doing. Is they have issues. I've begged for a forensic audit at that school board. They won't get a forensic audit. And here's the big thing: is two of the school board members currently have pushed that anybody that's made a complaint to the OIE, that they get knowledge of who it is so they can decide whether they want to let them speak at the school board. Now look, there's something wrong here that's even being brought out in the public. And I'll tell you, everybody's had an issue with this woman for years, and the board member Patricia, and she's backed by board member Morgan. Those two are rhinos. They're you know, at the very least, Chris Patricia is a fake Republican. She was a New York Democrat, and then she come down here, and all of a sudden she's a Republican. It's beyond me how many people are Democrat until they need to be Republican. Sam Fisher is another one. He was a Democrat for years. Now he needed to be Republican so Terry Miller could put him on the school board. It is a shell game, like you said, and when does the people wake up and say, no more of this?
Well, yeah, the problem is, and this is the advantage of what I call the hucksters and the fraud to the frauds, and that is essentially people only pay attention to what you say. They very rarely look at your actions. And to your point, if you look at the actions of the Lee County School Board, it's appalling. You've got a $2 billion, fund, and essentially you're not providing any transparency, and you're not making the schools any better. And it's truly unfortunate that they just allow them to have a job and a position, and they just keep finding new ways to dupe the public. Unfortunately, this is the problem. The public, if you want it to change, the public has to pay attention. Unfortunately, they know that the attention span of the public is very short.
Well, and I wish Ron DeSantis would come in like he did in Broward County at the school board. And it's identical corruption in Lee County as they had in Broward. And realistically, now I'm going to say this, in the Lee County School District, had it not been for Al Oaks' lawsuit hiring a private investigator to investigate the vendors and the allegations of fraud and corruption, we probably wouldn't have known about this.
That's exactly right. I mean, we've discussed this ad nauseum, the sort of cronyism among the vendor contracts in Lee County is absolutely appalling. And this is where your taxpayer dollars go. I mean, you would think that this would be the one thing that voters would follow, because let's be honest, nobody likes to pay taxes, whether you're rich or poor. No one wants to pay taxes. And where's your money going? To ridiculous spending within it. Look, we want our kids to have the best schools possible in Lee County. But let's be honest, just like the federal government, there's a lot of waste, fraud, and abuse.
Florida is just incredible to me that there aren't more people like me that's standing up, other parents, because I have children in the Lee County school system currently You know, I've said this before, me and my wife and all of my children were products of Lee County school system. We've never had good officials take charge. We've always had these people that were doing the bidding of the vendors and the job, not of the taxpayers and the children.
Well, that's exactly right. That is the biggest problem. And you also won't get a lot of parents to speak up because they're afraid that they're going to be labeled. So there's a fear component to it for a lot of parents. You've got some activists. You and I have seen the raucous school board meetings. We've seen different things. But I will tell you, you also have a factor where parents don't want to get involved because they don't want to be labeled a troublemaker for fear that it'll be taken out on their kid.
Well, I hope it gets better before it gets any worse, but I don't hold.
You know, we joking that it can't get any worse. Trust me, it can.
Well, I want to bring up one more thing. A lot of Republicans are wanting Ronna McDaniel to be out of office. So they've got a big call to action that's going to happen on the 20th. Now, do you think that Ronna will be taken out of office? Does Harmeet Dillon got what it takes to beat Ronna? I mean, where are we at with this?
Well, you know, it's a great question. I'm not a big McDaniel fan because, in my opinion, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and hoping for a different result. She's been there for quite a long time, and unfortunately, we continue to lose seats, and we need to change tactics the way we do it. You know, I'd like to see Harmeet Dillon get in there, but the fact of the matter is that this is a decision that 168 voters get to make. You and I don't get to make it. There's only a couple in Florida that get to make it. And unfortunately, I do believe that McDaniel is going to be reelected. If indeed she is reelected, I hope she does take the advice when it comes into mail-in ballots, tactics, and certain spending items that Harmeet Dillon's pushing.
Well, I'm going to put this little flyer up here so everybody can see if they want to participate. This is a call to action, and you can text Dan Cook at 239-285-4046 and reserve your seat on the bus. He will respond with the details. What is going on is Al Oates is providing a bus. There's limited seating, so you need to call ahead. It's going to leave from seed to table. Let me make sure I get you the right time. This Friday, you're going to come to seed to table, and they plan on leaving at 6 a.m. to be in Sarasota by 8 a.m. They're asking the Republican establishment that people are taking action to bring the Republican Party back to the roots of limited constitutional governance. I hope that goes well. If you want to go, you can either get on the bus or show up. The details will be in this flyer here. And, you know, Al Oates is always one to foot the bill for something he believes in, that's for sure.
Look, I think it's always better when more people are involved and engaged. And, you know, we've got a lot of good things going on in Florida, but we can always make them better. And the more civic engagement, the better they'll be.
Well, Ford, I'm going to wrap it up for this week's episode. I appreciate everything you're doing out here, and I'll be looking for you on other outlets and look forward to seeing you next week. You got anything coming up that we should know about?
Well, I'll tell you, it'll be all about bashing the Democrats over the Biden garage gate because, you know, my problem with Democrats is they always accuse Republicans of what they are doing themselves, and I'm sick and tired of the double standard and the two tiers of justice. All we ask for is that the goose gets treated like the gander, and unfortunately, if you have a different set of political beliefs or you might be a conservative, the problem is you're getting the short end of the stick.
Ford, as always, it's a pleasure to spend time with you. We'll be back next week right here on Smokin Joe Nation YouTube and other outlets. Please join us at wherever you get your podcast. And the best thing you can do for us is like and share this video. We'll see you next week. Love, peace, and Gator Grease. I love you, Florida.